Okay, moving on to the next team in the SEC that we will be going over today, and that would be Kermit Davis and the Ole Miss Rebels, as Coach Davis is going to be entering his third season as the head coach of the Rebels. And I feel like Ole Miss is a team that a lot of people are very boom or bust on. I think the Rebels have the possibility to either be really good or the possibility to be really bad or somewhere in the middle. And I'll start off by saying Kermit Davis did a really good job his first year in Oxford, leading the Rebels to the NCAA tournament, which is obviously not a very easy thing to do at all. But at the same time, last season, I expected Ole Miss to be pretty good. I expected Ole Miss to be like a top 5, top 6 team in the SEC, and a big reason for that was because they did return Devontae Shuler and Brian Tyree, who were two of the more dynamic scorers on their team from 2 years ago that ended up making the NCAA tournament. And unfortunately, this season, Brian Tyree is gone. And not only was Ole Miss bad last year, I feel like they were just very disappointing. And when you watch them play, they really didn't look anything close to the team a lot of people expected them to be at the start of the season. But at the same time, I do think there are some reasons for optimism if you're a fan of Ole Miss. If you're a Rebel fan, I think your goal for this season should just be make the NCAA tournament, because that was something they were able to do during the first season under Kermit Davis, and that's something they weren't able to do last year. And I feel like going into each of the respective seasons after that, that really has determined if there's a lot of momentum going into the Ole Miss program or not. And I feel like this year, if Ole Miss would have just been a smidge better last year, there would be some more optimism when you consider the fact Kermit Davis is their coach. Historically, he's won at Middle Tennessee State, and I will argue that he is one of the better coaches in college basketball. Once again, unfortunately, they do lose Brian Tyree, but there are 3 transfers coming in on this Ole Miss squad that does give Rebel fans a lot of optimism for the upcoming season. The first one is Romello White, the 6'9" redshirt senior from Arizona State. He averaged 10.2 points per game, 8.8 rebounds per game, 1 assist per game. And if you listen to my Pac-12 preview of the Arizona State Sun Devils, I mentioned that Romello White leaving Arizona State was a shock. I feel like he would have been a guy that just fit perfectly for that team, and I was really surprised he transferred when you consider the fact that he was a 3-year starter, and I do believe, looking at Arizona State's roster, they are a center away from being a top 10 team in college basketball. I really do believe that. I think if Romello White would have went back to ASU, I would have picked them to win the Pac-12. But he's here at Ole Miss, and even though the Rebels do return Kadeem Sy, who was their starting center last year, I am expecting Romello White to slide up and take that starting center job, and I feel like in order for Kermit Davis to put his best team out there, that's really what he's going to have to do. They bring in 2 other transfers, including Jarkel Joyner from UC Santa Barbara. He was a guy that averaged 15.6 points per game, 3.6 rebounds per game, and 1.4 assists per game. And then they also bring in Demencio Vaughn, the transfer from Rider, 6'5", former MAC Player of the Year, averaged 15 and 7 last year. And I think those 2 guards, along with Devontae Shuler, does provide Ole Miss with a very dynamic backcourt. And I do think they're going to be one of the more fun teams to watch in college basketball. Devontae Shuler, with no more Brian Tyree, I think is going to have much more of an opportunity, and he could score in bunches. He could run the point. He could create his own shot off the bounce. He could shoot from long range. I think he's one of the more underrated players in the country, and within Kermit Davis's offense, that 4-out motion offense, I do think that Shuler could be a big-time player for this Ole Miss team. Now, Jarkel Joyner is going to be a guy that I see running point along with Shuler, and I feel like he could be a guy that could really set the tone of this Ole Miss team. Joyner led the WAC in scoring last year during play and 2 years ago, and was a first-team all-WAC selection as a sophomore. Like Brian Tyree, Joyner worked out of isolation often at Bakersfield and was very often counted on to score. And I feel like when you play at a school like Ole Miss and you're moving up a level, going from the WAC to the SEC, it's always good that your team, even though it was in the WAC, really was relying on you to score the ball consistently. One of the other important players that the Ole Miss Rebels are going to be bringing in is the top 40 recruit, Matthew Murrell, the highest-rated recruit in the history of Ole Miss basketball. He's going to fight for starting minutes at the 2 spot. He's quick, athletic, crafty, could score, has good shooting touch, and he'll likely play off the ball with lineups and Shuler in it, forcing the latter to put on his point guard hat. Also in the mix is Luis Rodriguez and Austin Crowley, two guys who played a little bit last year. I'm curious to see which one of those two guys in particular end up cracking that rotation. And I feel like with Ole Miss, this is a team that, given the mix of their coaching and their talent, I think they're going to be right on the bubble. I think they're going to finish just short of the NCAA tournament. So I'm going to have 6 teams from the SEC making it. But I do think Ole Miss is a very talented team that is very capable. I feel like if I were to pick anyone out of the SEC that I don't have making it, it would be the Ole Miss Rebels. And it really is just going to depend, I think, what the adjustment is like for Joyner and Vaughn. We saw at North Carolina last year 2 grad transfers come in from mid-major schools, and a lot of people did expect them to have a big-time impact on that North Carolina team, Christian Keeling and Justin Pierce. And unfortunately, they were just never really able to adjust to the physicality of play in the ACC, and they were never really able to get their games going on a consistent level. I do think my worry, if I was an Ole Miss fan, would be, God forbid that happens to either Joyner or Vaughn, and then where do you go from here? Because I like Devontae Shuler, but besides him and Matthew Morrell, who's a freshman, I don't really know how much you could rely on him. I'm not really sure where exactly this Ole Miss Rebel offense would be coming from, but they have good depth. They have a lot of different options that Kermit Davis is going to be able to go to, and I do think, with all that being said, the Rebels could be in a solid spot to make some noise this year in the SEC, but at the same time, I just think it's going to be key for their transfers to really step up their game. Joyner, Vaughn, and Shuler could be a very potentially dynamic backcourt, but at the same time, they're going to need their other guys like Buffin, like White to step up. And it's going to be very interesting to see what exactly Romello White does in an Ole Miss uniform, because once again, we were all very surprised that he actually decided to leave Arizona State when that team was just playing phenomenal basketball towards the back end of last year. I believe that going into this season, they were one of the teams that had so much momentum, and Romello White decided to leave. Maybe him and Bobby Hurley just didn't get along. I'm not sure, but I'm curious to see the exact impact that he's going to be able to have in Oxford as a member of the Rebels.